Hello everyone and welcome to Blue Tengu's Game Development Show. That introduction still gets me the cheese. For those of you on YouTube, you don't have to sit through it. Just the people on Twitch with me, like Hollow Fire and 123 Gas, who are in the chat with me right now. This week, let's just jump right over to the task list over at Trello.com. This week, what I want to be doing is those artifacts that you can find in Project Skyring. I want to add some rules to them so that it's not just a completely random list. Some of the rules include like some artifacts only show up in certain areas. Like you could imagine like a snow shovel or a sled or something only showing up in the wintry area, and then like maybe suntan lotion or something like that showing up only in like the jungle. Things like that, as a weird example. Speaking of artifacts, I'm up to about, let's see, what is it right now? The latest number is, going through the list here, I'm up to 188. Ending with the wheelchair and the chain. Yeah, but I'll keep going as far as I can, especially once we add these rules in. Let's see, in overtime, I did get a lot done as usual. Like I've been spending this last couple of months with a lot of overtime, and the reason I've been doing that is because my son comes back in April, and I start grad school in April too. So as soon as April rolls around, I'm not going to be able to pull off all of this overtime. So I have to get as much done now as I can, which is why these overtime lists are pretty long for the last couple of weeks. But I did add in all of those extra tiles that were missing, including like Cirrus's suggestion last week of like a sand pit and things like that. Also added like brambles and other stuff. Those are all down here. More deserty style mountains. Fixed up the remains and monolith tiles to be the hand-drawn style. A lot of things like that with the tiles. But the biggest thing I did was a lot of the save load stuff. I don't think it's quite working right. I still need to fix a few bugs in it, but for the most part it's working. When you continue a game, you get the same islands back. You have your artifact list saved. All that sort of stuff is in there. The problem with an open world game and a world that's procedurally generated is it's tough to save all that stuff. It does require a lot of data. Unfortunately, GameMaker doesn't really come with any compression stuff, so those save files can get pretty large even for a simple game. Have to think of some way to make that more efficient. Maybe write my own compression algorithm or something. Or just find one. So find someone who's actually done that work and is willing to share it. But let's see, what else have we done? We've also, altitude-wise, this was kind of a big change, but up until now you've always been able to choose your own altitude by going up and down. But the problem was like enemies would always be on like slightly different altitude planes, and it was a little weird. It was kind of hard to tell who was where and stuff like that. So I made it a little more, well, let's see if I can use Paintbrush to describe kind of how it works. But you tend to drift towards like the whole number altitude level. So let's say this is altitude 3, this is altitude 4, this is altitude 5. You know, think of it looking from the side if you were going top down. You would just tend to level off there. If you were like here, you would level off down here. So just over time, you kind of go to these whole numbers. And the enemies are always at the whole numbers. That way it just makes it easier to tell if you're going to be facing enemies or not. It works out pretty well. It is a glider, so it's not exactly like a helicopter or something like that where it'd be weird. It is a glider, so it does kind of make sense that it would drift a bit. Feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. Works out. And let's see, tiles, artifact announcements, a couple of enemy things. Like for example, I did switch to not having hit points for the enemies, so one hit always kills them now. The reason I did that was just to help the game's flow. I think it is more of a game where it's like you're circling, you're killing, things like that. If you circle and an enemy just gets hurt, it just kind of interrupts the flow because you have to circle it again and stuff like that. So far, I think the no hit point version is working out better. Let's see. Minor thing had the player's shadow representing how much time has passed. So like if you're getting closer and closer to night, the shadow lengthens. Added a few effects and things like that. And when the player runs out of energy, they can go all the way down to the lowest altitude level. So that's pretty much it. Mostly tile stuff and saving stuff. But let's get into it for this week. I guess I should show where we're at right now, just real quick, before getting into it this week. Okay, well, let's just go with new game. Yeah, so there's our island. So right now we're in the plains level, so there's not really any forests or anything like that. The plains level is where you're going to start in the game, and it's going to be a pretty easy level. Not too many enemies to deal with on the ground, etc. But there we go. We've got a few extra tile types. We've got like flower types, grain types, things like that. There's still lava. I probably will make it so that the volcanoes don't show up so much earlier on. But yeah, there we are. It's saved, it's loaded, and you've got enemies and you can kill them in one hit. I've also changed it so that the player doesn't have hit points. They actually only have energy. Because I just figured it'd be kind of difficult to convey these two numbers to players without actually having a number or something on the screen. And I didn't want to have like this UI stuff cluttering up the screen for this kind of game. So now, if you do get hit, you just lose energy, and when you run out of energy, that's it. You start to sink, or if you take another hit, you die. I think it's much clearer that way. Just one central resource. But there we are. That's where we're at. Now we need to do the artifact stuff. And right now I've got these 188 some odd artifacts, but I do need to add some rules to them. So for example, some artifacts only show up in certain areas. This one, I would imagine like we said, the snow area, things like that. Certain artifacts would be better suited for showing up only in those areas. So let's see if we can figure out how to divide this stuff up. Right now, everything just shows up randomly. And the reason it does is because there's just one list of artifacts, and I think the easiest way to do this is going to be to have multiple lists of artifacts for the different rules that you can pick from. So let's see, where is that stuff? Map, probably. Oops, that's objects. Scripts, map, it's probably in the map script. So artifact assign. Yeah, allergies in Japan, so pardon me if I'm clearing my throat here and there. Let's see, DS grid. Yeah, so we've got this global artifact grid, which is actually a list of all the artifacts. Let's see, generate tile map names, update. Artifact list generate. Here's the thing that actually makes those lists. So it goes into that text ini file and starts grabbing all that text and throwing it into that global artifact grid. So I need multiple grids is the problem. Yeah, and I used to have, let's see, let's sort this. Artifact count. Yeah, I used to have just this arbitrary constant number that helped me with the looping and stuff like that. But if I have multiple lists, am I going to want to keep updating this number? There must be a better way to do this. Probably just getting the number of items in a grid would be the best way to get this number from now on. Let's see. So I'm creating the grid. Is there a DS grid add? Yes, okay. So if instead of set I used add, well, let's just replace these with add. I'm not going to need to do anything. This is just initializing the grid, so I could do it down here. Add. So we've got a title, a description, whether it's been placed on the map yet, whether it's been found by the player yet, and then a sound effect that goes with it. So we're going to have to do that down here. So we've got title, description, placed, found, sound. Yeah, if no text INI file exists, like if the player deleted this, what would we do? Because they would just have a bunch of, they wouldn't have any of the text or anything for the artifacts. I guess it would just break the game. Let's think about that. That's probably a question to worry about later. Artifacts. Well, this is actually just a game question. So if no text file is found, what do we do? I'll save that for later. I would assume that we wouldn't want to do anything if we couldn't have the text file. We probably do want to give the player some sort of warning about it, though, like you should reinstall the game or something. But now we don't need this. So we're going to depend on that text file existing. We're going to add title, description, place, found, sound. That's one list worth. So right now we just have one section in that INI file called artifact titles, artifact descriptions, but if we want to have this thing figure out how to break this up into multiple lists, we're going to have to change those sections. So looking over here, let's go ahead and do all of these rules at once. So area-based ones, rare ones, night ones, and that looks like about it. So we have, let's just put this at the bottom here. Snow, guess I just have to do one for each area. So plains, forest, desert, jungle, snow, volcanic, and dead zone. We also want night, I guess day and night. So artifacts that can only be found if it's the daytime, artifacts that can only be found at night, and rare. And we're going to have to do these same lists for the descriptions. What I did so far is I divided up the lists, so now we do have proper lists. So the thing is, we have the lists, we just have to decide the rules, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to have to do it from the tile. So the tile itself is going to have to figure out what room it's in. Maybe the tile, maybe the function, but it's going to have some rules, like if you're in the desert, then there's a random chance of using the generic list or the desert list. If it's night, then there's a random chance of using the generic list, the desert list, or the night list, things like that. So that's what we're going to have to do for these to kind of knock them all off one after the other after the break. We do need to make some rules here. So let's see. Let's go with the generic one. Let's see. We've got, thinking of the odds, I need my notepad here. In terms of numbers, we have 100 generic ones, 10 for each area, 10 for each day night, and then 10 rare ones. So you would think, looking at this, that maybe, let's see, 90%, well, let's say 80% generic. 80% generic, 10% area, 10% day-night, 1% rare or something like that. Maybe those kind of odds would be alright. Just trying to think, if you went through, if you had 10 artifacts in like the plains level, with these odds you would find 8 generic ones, 1 that's based on that area, 1 that's based on that day-night, so you would basically have to play the game 10 times to get everything. So let's not make the odds that ridiculous. 20, 25. No, I still want that to be low. 50, 70, 90, 59. So in this scenario, you would find in each map, each playthrough, you would find 6 generic ones, 2 that belong to that area. So it would take you 5 playthroughs to find all of the area ones, unless you got really lucky with the random stuff. Day night, since that's across all of the areas, that could be a little lower. That could be higher. So now you would find 6 generic ones per map. So it would take you about 3 playthroughs or so to get all of the generic ones. In terms of area, you would find, yeah, it would take you about 3 playthroughs to get all of the area ones. And it would take you, let's see, 10%, assuming there's 7. It would take you about 2 playthroughs to get all the day-night ones. Okay, those odds seem pretty good. If you need me to explain those, let me know. But basically, the idea is if we don't do like latitude or longitude anymore, if we just do latitude, like if you had 10 areas inside of like the plains, and each of those has an island with an artifact on it, that's just what I was thinking. So you just kind of want to balance it so that the number of playthroughs is going to be the same. You don't want to have like, you've already got all the generic artifacts, but you have to do like 10 extra playthroughs to get like the area ones. You want to avoid that. You want to balance it out a little better. So obviously the rare one would be for players who really play the game a lot. And that should be okay. Retrieve artifact. This should all be okay. So now, when I get an artifact, it should be based on odds, the time of day, and the room you're in. In terms of saving and loading, I'm still only using the generic list, so weird things will happen in the game, but let's just see if this works. It's going to be kind of hard to test. Because the odds are of me finding a generic artifact, so it's going to be a bit hard to test. We'll see what we can do, though. I'm going to use my debugging thing to start tracking artifacts, though. It doesn't look like there's one on this island. None on that island. There's a purple line will show up and guide me to the nearest artifact. That's the nice, like I've always said before, that's the nice thing about being the developer. You can cheat as much as you want to. Gamer Circle C. Yeah, like Gamer Circle. I couldn't put his name in there, so I had to go with Gum Circle. Let's see, Willisk. And the frame rate's dropping because I've got a lot of tiles loaded. Still haven't made the deletion of the islands efficient yet, so. There we go. I've got an artifact down there. Get rid of the enemies. With so many tiles loaded up right now, it's going to be pretty slow in terms of frame rate. Going to crawl, especially when I get close to the ground because the detail comes up. That will get better once I start deleting the islands, though, because right now they're all loaded, and that's not good. Come on, buddy. Come on. 7 frames. Come on. You can do it. Yeah, GameMaker is very inefficient when it comes to having like a lot of objects and stuff. There aren't really any good ways to do like instances and stuff like that, so it can get kind of inefficient. It's unfortunate that the closest artifact was on this island that's way, way out here. I should probably just go into the data directory and delete the files. Alright, there we go. Artifact grid, not set before reading it. DS grid set, global artifact grid. Okay. SCR find artifact, line 4. SCR find artifact, line 4. Okay. That's this. That's the thing that actually gives me the artifact and allows me to announce it. Yeah, this one's going to be tough. Because I've got an artifact ID that's telling me which artifact this is, but that's no longer giving me which kind of artifact it is. Shoot. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Alright, we're going to have to add another variable in there. Artifact ID. It's inside the hex tile itself. So what I'm going to need to do is add another variable that keeps track of the type. Artifact type. And this can be -1 for now. Artifact type. And find the artifact ID. Artifact assign. Yeah, this is kind of unfortunate. Because the problem is GameMaker functions can only return one value. Well, like a proper function. So, unfortunately, the decision on which type it is comes from here at the moment. So what we could do is we could break the odds determiner part out of this into a separate function so that I can grab the type, put it into the variable, and then find an artifact of that type. So it'll just be kind of splitting this script into two things. There we go. Okay, we've got an artifact. The game didn't crash, so we're on the right track. Let's see what it does. Get down there. Unknown, unknown. Well, there we go. So it's not working properly. It could be it just happened to pick one of the ones that's in the quotes, but it's obviously going to need a little bit more debugging. Grid index out of bounds. Writing 1. Size is 510. Interesting. Oh, this is for the saving and loading stuff because I haven't changed that yet. So that's obviously broken. That's fine. That's as to be expected. Let's see what kind of debug messaging we got here. Exceed. Artifact created. Artifact discovered 0. Okay, artifact discovered 0, so I would assume that my problem is the generate list part, this. Because I'm trying to retrieve 0 from it. It does look like references are a problem, so I am going to have to do a little more work to get this working, but the rules are in place. It's just a matter of debugging stuff, so it's not going to be too hard. TS grid add. Oh, well, there we go. There's the problem. It actually is working. The problem is the code I copied and pasted, artifact titles, it's not finding the text is the problem. So looking in here, artifact titles, planes, artifact titles. It didn't find the texts because the problem is if right now, the reason I got unknown as text is because that's the default. If I don't find the value in here, it defaults to unknown. So it's not finding the value inside of this text list. So whatever it happened to pick up, planes, artifact descriptions. Let's see. Planes, artifact descriptions. Looks like I have the titles right. Ah, the other thing, yes. The other thing is these numbers. There's the problem. There's the problem. I need these to be 0 on up. Because these are new sections now, so they can't be the same number. Okay, that should solve our problem. I hope. I hope. There are other problems, but let's see. Days, try months even sometimes. Yes, Sumas, you are right. Oh, data. Yeah, redoing stuff is always... Well, it's always never fun. Alright, do I have an artifact down there? Yes! Finally, an artifact right off the bat. Let's land near Sarcasticus Bay. See what we got here. Food jar! Yes! I got a food jar! Ah, feels good. Things are working. I think a food jar was one of the generic ones, but we can check that out. Let's try to find another artifact real quick. Yeah, now not a lot of oceans are showing up. I guess it just was really bad random chance that all those oceans were showing up. You know what I should do, actually, is inside of the grid manager. Right now I just have a random chance of it being an ocean. What I should be doing is keeping track of how many oceans I've spawned and just kind of say, if there are too many of these things, then start lowering the odds of making one. That's probably the smart way to do it. I'm getting food jar again just because the artifact ID isn't properly getting randomized, so that's something I'll have to fix. But it's working, and where is food jar? Yeah, it's just a generic one, so I'll go in and test it and stuff, but you guys don't need to see that. So some artifacts only show up in certain areas. We do have that rule in place, so that's done. Some artifacts are rare, that's done. The rules are there. Day, night. Randomize the list only the first time. That's something I do have to do. And ruins being less common out of temperate zones. I wasn't sure how long today would take, so I had those in there, but I wasn't expecting to get to them. So let's wrap up. So today, some artifacts only show up in certain areas. We got that done. Day, night, rare rules. So we got the rules done. The artifacts are being generated according to rules. The only problem is kind of the randomization of the list, which we have to do. Because right now it always starts with the first item in the list. And if it chooses generic, it's going to be the food jar over and over again. So I do need to go in and change a few of those things. Get that fixed. Go in and update saving and loading. That's not going to take too long. I just need to make these tasks here so I remember them. Save, load, handle new artifact grids, and artifact list, reindex. So basically the credits and the other stuff that I didn't go in and change, you know, hand by hand. So I just need to remember to do that stuff, which is why this is going in the task list, and I'll do that right after the show, while it's still fresh in my mind. But that was episode 35, Free to Rule. Probably not a terribly exciting episode because it is involving a lot of scripting and everything else, but it had to be done, and it is done now. So artifacts are generated according to certain rules. Let's think about what we want to do next week. Episode 36. Thank you for sticking with me during this episode and all the off-topic talks and stuff. By the time this goes up on YouTube, I'm sure it's like an hour long, if that. So let's think about next week. This is a lot of like maintenance stuff, so I could probably skip through that. Yeah, that's all stuff. Tutorial. Yeah, these are my kind of candidates for week 36. A tutorial or an opening? Because like I mentioned, starting in April, I'm not going to have a lot of time outside of the actual show itself to work on this. So I want to get the complicated stuff out of the way. And I remember from Project Spaghetti, last year's game, that timelines and tutorials and stuff like that turn out to be a little more work than expected. Let's go with an opening first. Let's do that. So when you first start the game, there'll be an opening sequence. The character may be near a grave or something like that, and then flying off, and then probably the tutorial is going to be kind of wrapped into this, so they're kind of the same tasks. It's going to be huge, so I'm not going to finish it next week, but I need to get it started. Thank you for watching our game development show. You can catch past episodes in this one over at youtube.com/BlueTenguStudio. If you are watching this later on YouTube, drop by the live show we do every week at Twitch TV Blue Tengu. At least through March, our times are Friday. Friday is 3 to 5 Pacific, 4 to 6 Mountain, 5 to 7 Central, 6 to 8 Eastern, Daylight Savings Time. I think. Let's see. If it's Daylight Savings Time now, I guess it would be 4 to 6. Let me get this straight. Friday is 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific, 5 to 7 Mountain, 6 to 8 Central, 7 to 9 Eastern. So yeah, you are in Daylight Savings Time now. In the UK, I think Daylight Savings Time starts next weekend, so it'll be midnight to 2 a.m. And if you're in Japan with me, where everything's nice and easy, it's just 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you're in Australia, depending on where you live, it's going to start anywhere from 8 a.m. to about noon, and about noon in New Zealand. I think your Daylight Savings Time starts in April, so we're still good. But we do always announce what we're doing through Twitter, so follow BTengu to keep track of when the live show starts or episodes go up, or follow us on Twitch or YouTube to get announcements that way. Of course, you can see what we're up to anytime over at our site, bluetengu.com. And again, if you pitched in a little extra for Project Spaghetti at HIO, you have the Sapphire key file. You need to unlock prototypes as we put them up. In terms of today's prototype, it's probably not really worth putting it up because the only thing that's changed is kind of the artifact stuff, and it's not quite working yet. If I do get it working this weekend, I'll just put a prototype up. But last week's prototype is up. Last week's prototype up. Last week's episode, all the work that went into that is up, like all the saving and loading and stuff like that. It's not quite working, so your mileage may vary, but it is a prototype, so that's what it is. Of course, we would appreciate any support we can get with Project Spaghetti, our Season 1 game, getting it greenlit on Steam. Thank you all for watching. I will stick around in the chat, but I will see you all next time.